Hey guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a drama from Estonia. This is spoken in the Estonian and Russian language with English subs, released in the year 2015, directed by Klaus Harrow, and this film is called The Fencer. So The Fencer tells the story of Endel Nellis. This is partially based on his real-life account. He was an Estonian fencer during the World War. So at the end of the World War II, he actually came into Estonia. Now, unfortunately, he was reluctantly conscripted to actually fight for the Germans, and since the end of the World War, the Soviet Union have hunted down these traitors and they're sending them to Siberian prison camps. And so Endel Nellis doesn't want to suffer this fate, so he seeks refuge in a remote community in Estonia, and now he's a PE teacher at this school. So he's teaching these children under the strict guidelines of the principal, who rules by an iron fist, and this is where Endel Nellis gets the idea that he's going to teach the children fencing. So this is not on the curriculum, and so this angers the principal because Endel Nellis is actually influencing the parents to stand up to the principal. So in turn, the principal is actually going to investigate who Endel Nellis is. He's actually going to go into his history, and this really leaves the door open for Endel Nellis's cover to be blown. And so he's trying to stay away from the principal, and he's trying to create less attention as possible, but that is going to be very difficult because now his class has been invited to go to a tournament in Leningrad. Now, this is actually going to threaten his safety because if he goes to Leningrad, obviously there's a strong possibility that he's going to be apprehended, but on the other hand, he wants to reward the children and open the eyes of the children to discover a world that they're not familiar with because they're living under the constraints of the regime. So it's a predicament he's facing, and what he chooses is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on The Fencer. I really wanted to see this film for three very good reasons. Number one, it's an Estonian movie. I haven't been exposed to Estonian cinema yet, so it's always very exciting and very intriguing to see what a new country can deliver. Number two, it's about a man who really shaped a history, and he really made a huge impact on the era that he was in. And number three, it was about fencing. Basically, fencing is a sport that I've always been intrigued by, but I never really understood. I watched it on the Olympics so many times. I really appreciate the history of fencing and how intricate the minor details to fencing are and how hard it can be, and so I thought those three reasons were a perfect recipe for success. And I thought that this is going to be like a cake that looks really delicious, and I was hoping that it was actually going to taste delicious. And so sometimes you get these films that do basically create this image inside your head that's all a facade, and basically it doesn't really match that image, and it comes across as a bit of disappointment. Now, this movie was actually nominated, it was actually Estonia's entry for the Academy Awards, and so it does have a lot of recognition. Unfortunately, it went under my radar, but there are a lot of people whose radar didn't go under, so it does have a recognition. So for that reason, I was really hoping that I could actually have a film that I could recommend to you all that you really haven't heard of. And unfortunately, although the movie is not as great as I wanted it to be, it was still very, very intriguing. It was actually a very uplifting tale of one man standing up to a regime. And there's a common attitude in life there that you feel as though I'm only one person, what can I do? You know, the problem is so much bigger than me, so I'm not even going to try. But this is a movie that tells a story of when someone actually does try and how much of a difference that person can make. And so in this movie, you've got the symbolization of the Soviet Union, which is this school. You've got the principal, that is basically the symbolization of Joseph Stalin, and what happens when an outside influence creates something different, and how that can rustle the feathers. And basically a dictator's greatest fear is change. And so the outside influence of Endel Nellis upon these children is having that devastating effect within this regime that's having a stranglehold on the overall community. And so basically, you can't change the world, you can't change a regime, but you can change the world of one person. And basically that's what the movie is telling you, and that's why I felt as though the movie had a really good heart to it, a very, very charming heart, and it's a very uplifting experience, and it's an experience that can teach us a lot of things. And so not only do you have a lot of intrigue to the film, I thought that that overall story and the overall story of David versus Goliath was very, very rewarding to the viewer. And that's something I really appreciated, because in turn that also creates a strong thrilling aspect in this movie, is that initially you see a movie about fencing, about a teacher. It's a PG rated here in Australia, so that's basically children can actually go and see the film, so you could be forgiven for thinking that this is going to be a boring film. If you're not a fan of fencing, if you don't really care about Estonian cinema, or you don't really care about who Endel Nellis was, you're going to think to yourself, this is going to be really hard to get through. But unfortunately, it's surprisingly very easy to get through, because there is that thrilling aspect aspect of not knowing whether or not Endel Nellis is going to be caught. Is his cover going to be blown? So you've got a thrilling aspect without it going into a thriller territory. It's not a thriller of a film, but it has that aspect that actually keeps you glued to the screen. So there is something for people who might not necessarily be interested in the overall source material. And so I thought that was very smart from Klaus Harrow. He's actually created something for a lot of people, and it actually will apply to a lot of people and keep a lot of people actually watching and preventing them from looking at their watch. So that's something I really, really appreciated, and that's something you get from a lot of European cinema. It's actually very smart storytelling. So the storytelling in this movie was actually told through the visuals as well. Visually, it's a very arresting film, very grey palette, which actually symbolised the constraints that these people were under. These children were under straitjackets, and when these children open their eyes to fencing, it shows you how impactful and how powerful a simple sport can be. And this is where I really like the aspect of the fencing qualities, is that I didn't know too much about fencing, but it gives you a little bit of insight into the sport and how the intricate details and how those details can actually be used in life itself. And so some sports you actually get, okay, it's just a game, but the life lessons from these games can actually shape you as people, and it's actually shaping these children, and that's something that I thought was very, very intriguing. So there's a lot of intrigue to the film, and the intrigue is capitalized, and I thought it was also capitalized in the actual person of Endel Nellis. I thought the actor who played Endel Nellis, his name is Mart Avandi. Very good actor, and he plays this guy who is that symbolisation of hope. Is that in a country that is ruled by an iron fist, you can't be free, there is no hope for that country. But when you've got people like Endel Nellis who are willing to step up and willing to put their life on the line in order for the greater good and putting their country before them, it gives you that hope that, okay, not all is lost. And so that bright beaming light is actually influencing these children, and in turn you're actually feeling happy for these children. But then you've got the principal in the background who is basically thudding down his hands, and he's basically making a fist saying that he's not going to stand for this. So although they're actually having a better future, there's always that principal who's grabbing them by the collar and he's pulling them back. So that's the fist of, Joseph Stalin. This is the fist of communism. This is a fist of basically everything has to be the same. You can't have your own thoughts. And so that is what creates, as I said, that thrilling aspect. And so it's a very powerful film in its soundtrack as well. I thought the score actually plays a lot of emotion to it, and the acting from the children especially was very good. I was actually surprised by how good young people can actually act these days. And so you've got, as I said, these children, and you're basically a teacher teaching these children life lessons. But what I liked about the movie, one of the many things I liked about the movie, was that it had a greater meaning. As I said, the school symbolised Soviet Union, the principal symbolised basically the regime that is controlling everybody, and the outside influence of Endel Nellis. And so it's a very smart film, and it does magnify itself so much more than just what you're actually seeing on screen. But unfortunately, it's not a masterpiece, and the reason why it's not a masterpiece is because it does get very silly in the second half. The first half builds a very good foundation that feels like a biography that's very respectful to the very brave person of Endel Nellis, but unfortunately in the second half it starts to get a little bit silly. It starts to cut corners, and it starts to get to the territory of sugarcoating things and actually making it a little bit cheesy, and it's very eye-rolling, and it actually gives you the impression that it's actually taking inspiration from mainstream Hollywood, is that it has to be happily ever after, and you think to yourself, well, this is not how I felt in the first half of the film. Is that it feels like a different film. It feels like it's alleviating all the pressure that it's actually created. It's not really giving you that impression that it is one guy standing up to a regime. It's basically defeating the attitude of I'm only one person, what can I do? In the second half it starts to get very Hollywoody, and I thought as though it got very predictable, and therefore I kind of lost my interest. It alleviates the pressure that it creates so well in the first half, and so I just don't think the continuity was as smooth as it really needed to be. But fortunately it doesn't derail the experience to a point where I thought it was a bad film. I just thought that the second half really needed to be a lot better if it wanted to be the film that I think it really thinks it is. And so it's not as great as I thought it could have been, but having said that, it's still very uplifting. It's got a very, very good production level, and at the same time it's basically symbolizing everything that is good in life and paying respect to a man who was very brave. And also you've got the fencing qualities, a sport that you may not have heard of, and you're learning a little bit more about that as well. So overall, still a very fascinating film, but whether or not you're going to watch it more than once remains to be seen. I'm going to give The Fencer 3.5 stars. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later.